Mindful Coach podcast. So welcome to this edition of the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill, founder of the Mindful Coach Association, and I have my own practice in mindfulness coaching and somatic work. And wow, I can't wait to introduce you to a guy I know who's doing really amazing work, Rob Lieblein. He is a member of the Mindful Coach Association. And one of the things I like the most about the coaches that we talk to on this show, and Rob is a perfect example of this, are the people who are doing really, I think it's courageous work, because they're working with people who really need it, people who are really suffering. He's a specialist in conditions with like fibromyalgia, fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, migraine headaches, chronic back, shoulder pain, chronic pain conditions that millions and millions of people have. But he approaches it not from the traditional approaches of medicine, but from a mind-body holistic integration place. And he's here to tell us all about that. So welcome to the show, Rob. Did I introduce you accurately there?
I think that sounds great, and thanks for having me, Brett. As you know, I'm a fan of the podcast, and it's really nice to be a guest as well. So, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I mean, we want the world to hear about the important work that our coaches are doing, and in particular, the kind of work that you're doing, because it matters. And there are so many people. I've had clients come to me, and they're struggling with chronic pain, and I'm not a specialist, and I can't really help them. So I have to forward them on to people like you. And so how did you get involved with this as a specialization of all the things you could do in terms of, coaching people? How did this come into focus for you?
Yeah, well, it really starts from my own experience, and I guess the old coaching adage is that we want to coach the people that we used to be. And
Yes.
I've been through a number of bouts of chronic pain, not really knowing exactly what was behind it, but the more recent one came up for me when I had rotator cuff surgery for a pretty significant rotator cuff tear in my left shoulder, and life seemed to be going along really nicely at that point, and then I was sidelined. And years ago, I had the other shoulder operated on, so I knew it was going to put me on the sidelines for quite a while. I knew that it was going to interfere with my ability to work, and I knew that the recovery was long and painful and tedious. And so it wasn't so much the injury. I knew that I could have surgery. I knew I could recover. But it was a lot of the other stuff that was attached to what went with having the surgery and the recovery that started to bring up some anxiety in me.
Oh, wow.
So I was becoming a little, I was becoming anxious about it, right? Thinking about what are all the consequences going to be, and leaning a little into catastrophizing. But I did have the surgery done. It went well. The doctor did a great job. And as I was rehabbing, I noticed that my anxiety wasn't really going away. And I started to worry about things like, is my shoulder healing properly? It feels a little weird. Should I be stronger? Doctor said I was doing fine. And I noticed then that, my other shoulder, my good shoulder, began bothering me.
Oh, so your other shoulder started to get involved with this, whatever, this discomfort, this injury somehow. How did that, that must have been unsettling.
It was unsettling, for sure, to say the least. And there wasn't much of a reason for me to incur an injury to that shoulder or to feel pain in that shoulder. And after that, that kind of ramped up my level of anxiety a little bit as well. And from there, I started to feel, the pain just started to spread, basically. I started to experience pain in my neck that felt like it was radiating down my shoulder. Took some doctor took some imaging and said that I had stenosis in my neck. So
what is that for the listeners? What is that?
Yeah, stenosis is just a narrowing of the spinal cord, the canal within the vertebra. So, it's some
Was that a genetic
degeneration.
thing, or is that?
It is incredibly common. I didn't
Oh, I
know
see.
it at the time, but people, I'm in my 50s now. People in their 50s are going to have that, and we can
Oh, I
talk a
see.
little
Okay.
more about the implications of that. But for me, the implication was, holy cow, I'm breaking down here, and
It's downhill from here, folks.
yeah. But then that the pain continued to spread,
Oh,
and I'll kind of give you an abbreviated version, but I was getting lower back pain. I started experiencing hip pain, that was sort of like plantar fasciitis in my feet, pain that
ouch.
resembled carpal tunnel syndrome, strange symptoms. I literally had pain from and weird sensations from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, the soles of my feet,
So
at different times.
how long was this going on?
The whole episode, right, was probably about a year.
Oh
And it
my God.
wasn't like everything was happening at once. It was a little
No,
more
but
like,
something was
yeah,
skewed this whole time and painfully
yes.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of like whack-a-mole. And I went
Oh
to,
no.
quite a number of different doctors and specialists. Nobody could really figure out, give me an indication that anything was wrong.
Mm.
I had MRIs. I had a number of steroid injections in different parts of my body. I was in physical therapy. I was doing acupuncture, chiropractic. I was,
Everything you can get your hands on. Yeah.
yes, and nothing gave me, even more than, once in a while I'd get a little bit of temporary relief. But I had convinced myself um, that something was gravely wrong with me, but
Mm.
nobody could figure it out. And so I was caught in this, what they call the pain fear cycle. So I'm experiencing
Pain,
pain.
fear,
I don't like it. That brings up some anxiety and some fear, which amplifies whatever symptoms I'm already experiencing.
wow.
Um, right, which amplifies the pain. So it's just this vicious cycle that I was caught up in. And I was expecting to be, seriously disabled or whatever, once somebody could finally figure out what the heck was going on with me. And
So what happened? I mean, somehow you had some kind of insight, maybe. I mean, what helped you? Did you did you fix this? Did you? Or I mean, fix like it's not like there was a turnkey, but
it
tell
is.
me
It is.
tell me more.
I feel great now, and really, the beginning of the big turnaround for me came when I contacted a friend who I hadn't seen in a while because I'd known her for close to 20 years, but she had
Mm,
moved out of the neighborhood a while back. But she was always someone who had a number of different diagnoses that were kind of non-specific. Well, she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, some other things, but I knew that she had, been dealing with a lot of pain
I
in
see.
her life and different symptoms. So I asked her to have coffee with me, and because I was hoping that maybe she could give me just some tips on how to manage
Sure, of
pain.
course.
And by the luck of, or the universe aligning correctly, I caught her at a time when she had actually recovered herself from these decades
Wow.
of serious symptoms, and having probably what she would describe as a smaller and shrunken life because of those
Mm.
symptoms. But
I
she
just
was feeling,
I just feel that in my soma when you say that smaller,
yeah,
shrunken.
yeah.
Mm.
And she told me that she had recovered by, of all things, using an app, right? And this
Okay.
and this app was something that I had actually seen advertised on Facebook, but I had kind of ignored it, like, yeah, it's just another thing. But it's
Sure.
the app is called Curable, and it's really based on, it's a self-paced, I guess you'd call it a course or a resource for exactly this type of pain that it turns out that I had, pain and symptoms, which are sometimes referred to as neuroplastic pain, um, TMS, mind-body
So
syndrome.
what is neuroplastic pain?
Neuroplastic pain is pain that is actually generated by the brain.
I see.
And it's sort of learned pain. So
Oh,
as you experience pain, get used to having pain, and the circumstances surrounding the pain, the brain develops neural pathways that just interpret
pain
signals that
back.
wouldn't,
Yeah,
yes,
right.
yeah, that wouldn't ordinarily cause pain, but the brain is interpreting it as pain
I
because
see.
it's such a well-worn pathway in the brain that so right, neuroplasticity referring to the changing nature of the brain, the nature
Sure.
of the brain to change, create new neuronal connections, to learn and unlearn things. So this was kind of where I was, and she checked in with me and said and asked me. She said, "I don't mean to proselytize about this, but just to be sure, you've been to doctors, you haven't been diagnosed with any, serious medical condition, et cetera." And I
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
"No." And she said, "Well, this, takes you through neuroplastic pain or mind-body pain, as it's sometimes referred to.
Hmm.
Um, Psychosomatic is another word, but that has such negative connotations because it implies, in our culture that you're making it up.
Imaginary. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Mhm. But she said that working with this program, which involved, a variety of methods from journaling to psychoeducation and learning about the nature of pain to different meditations and somatic tracking and et cetera, that she had actually gotten better and had
Wow.
gotten off of her meds and back out into her life. So I subscribed to the app immediately,
Yes,
and
of
that
course.
was my start because that was my introduction to the idea of mind body syndrome and symptoms that are not based in pathological problems. There may be there are definitely physiological reactions, but that the symptoms I was experiencing were really based in emotions, in stress, um, and had their origin up in the mind, and that I wasn't broken.
Hmm.
Um, and that also introduced me to a lot of the people who are doing such good work in this field, because the Curable app was developed by a team of people with lots and lots of experience. And so I went well beyond working with the app. The app wasn't enough for me, but I kind of cut and pasted my way to healing by reading books, listening to podcasts, the app itself, just trying a lot of different methodologies and seeing who's doing what out there, and I kind
So
of cobbled together my own path to healing.
was it a process of was there a point in time when you turned, you started to explore this app and you started to that you realized there's really something to this. Like this is helping. Was there a, was that like incremental, or was there just like oh yeah, this is really making a difference? Was there a moment
It,
like that?
I would say it was incremental. My recovery probably took close to a year, 8 months to a year, to feel like I was before all of this started. But there was definitely a light bulb moment when I reflected back on. I had mentioned that I had had a couple of bouts of this, without knowing it, but many years ago when I'd experienced about 8, 9 years of chronic migraine headaches,
Oh my.
and those started at a time when I became a father. Right, we had our child.
Oh,
We moved, became a first time home buyer, and I
moving
also changed.
child. Yeah, no
And a new
stress.
a new job, yes, and a new
And a
job
new
within a
job. Yeah,
period
right.
of a few months.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, and that's when my migraines became chronic.
Yeah.
And, I was seeing, again, it was one of those circumstances where I was seeing a neurologist. I went to the headache clinic at Montefiore Medical Center and was working with a doctor for many
And
years.
did anybody mention to you the notion of stress?
Not so much. They would sometimes ask me what's going on in your life, and I said, "Well, I've got the baby at home, and I started a new job." They're like, "Okay, yeah, it's stress," but
Here, take
they
two of these
weren't.
and call me tomorrow, right?
Well, what they diagnosed it as was, they called it primary headache, right? Or just
Primary. Oh my God.
yes,
I'm sorry to
idiopathic
laugh,
pain.
but
Uh huh.
oh my.
But nothing, none of the real treatments that I had. I tried a million different drugs. I had my
Yeah.
brain MRI'd, and as they say, they found nothing
Mm.
there. And, after about 8 years, as our kid got older, more independent, because I was a little more involved in the day-to-day childcare than my
Sure.
wife, just because my work schedule was more flexible. As that started to ease up, the headache started to go away.
I see.
And I'm certainly not blaming my kid for my headaches,
No, of
but
course not. It's just your the
yeah,
context. It's just the way that it
yes,
works.
uh-huh. And so looking back and saying, well, they came on without any kind of injury or disease. They went
Mm.
away, after throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. And it's like, okay, yeah, that was definitely neuroplastic pain. That was definitely mind body syndrome.
So you said you used the app and you got some real progress out of that, and then you went beyond it. It's just sort of like putting it all together. And so at some point or another, you I guess you feel like you made enough progress and were inspired enough to kind of say, I want to help other people now.
Yeah, well, there was, along the way, there was still this kernel of doubt in my mind
Mm,
that, little voice saying, maybe there really is something going
mm,
on with you. And that is an important hurdle to make it over if you're going to recover from this kind of pain and these symptoms, is really accepting that there's nothing wrong with you, that
mhm.
you're not in fact broken. In fact, that's probably the biggest hurdle that most people who have this syndrome have to overcome, is just that bit of doubt, um,
Sure.
because the brain really holds on to it
Yeah,
tightly.
it's hard to get your head around the notion that this isn't being caused by something in me. It's
Right,
hard to get
right.
your head.
But eventually, I did start doing more physically, and I learned to be a little more, can't ignore pain and symptoms, but I learned to be more indifferent to them, knowing that I wasn't being harmed by them. They
Hmm.
were unpleasant, right? So I reframed how I looked at those symptoms. And the more I engaged in life and activity and the world, the better I felt, until, it's kind of like the impacts that meditation can have on a person. A practice of many years, and then suddenly you look back at the huge changes that you may recognize in yourself, but um, it didn't feel like anything was necessarily happening on a day-to-day basis.
There were
It's
incremental
in
changes
hindsight,
adding up to a big change.
incremental
Yeah.
changes.
Mhm.
Exactly. So that really had it, as you were saying, it did have a tremendous impact on my worldview, because,
Mm.
I went from checking out my life insurance policy and things like that,
Oh,
just
wow.
wondering where's this all going to lead, to being told that, even though I was never in danger, right, for disability, death, whatever it might be, my brain didn't know that. So I was reacting. I was kind of living in a world where I thought that was a distinct possibility. So it's almost like being given this reprieve and a newfound appreciation and gratitude for everything that I have, and that feeling was so impactful on me that I said, I've really got to find a way to be able to help other people who are in a similar circumstance, and maybe help them do it a little more smoothly and a little
Right. I
less
mean,
guesswork. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Kind of like you were
Hmm.
out there putting it all together, and now people can
Yeah.
benefit from all your years of study and practice. So
Yeah, and
one
on my
question,
website, I say it was, I describe it as a real DIY job. So, yeah,
right.
it got me where I wanted to go, but I think there's a better path that I can provide for people who are
Well, I think that's one of the
in
big
these shoes.
values of having an
Hmm.
experienced, expert at your side, particularly one who's walked the path and knows. Which brings me to this question that I hear from time to time. If you're, because your work involves helping people be, I would let me just ask, does your work involve, helping people be more mindful about the state of their body? Do you work with people to do that, like how to be more present with your experience in a way?
It definitely does. There's a large element of mindfulness in the approach that I take, and of course, each person is unique and will respond differently to different um, sort of methodologies of healing. But it really is about, a lot of it is helping people trust their bodies and not be
Hmm.
so alarmed with symptoms, and to understand what is just normal. I mean, nobody is completely pain free.
Right.
And as we age, our bodies start to make sounds and that they didn't make when they were in their 20s, right? Little cracks here and creaks there. At the same time, trying to cut the cord of hypervigilance
Hmm.
over bodies. So there's, you want to walk that fine line because you really don't want somebody being reactive to every little thing that they feel in their body. It's like, oh,
Well,
my
that,
wrist is tight. Now my ankle's tight.
yeah, and but along those same lines, it's like, what do you say to someone who's like they're experiencing pain? And you want to say, okay, so tune into your body, and they tune in their body, and their body is going, ah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like unfun to hang out there
Yeah.
with that painful experience. So how is it that tuning into your body, which is yelling at you basically,
Mm-hmm.
is a path to being better?
Well, one of the techniques that I teach in the practice is something called just somatic tracking, right? And typically, you want a person to engage in somatic tracking when their pain levels are, maybe a 5 or a 6 at the most, not when they are in a huge flare up of, experiencing a 9 or a 10. But somatic tracking, and you may well know this, Brett, from your experiences, is really just attending to the body, noticing where you're experiencing sensations, but from a place of equanimity. You're an objective observer. This is what I'm experiencing. This is where it is. This is how it feels. And while you're doing that, sending yourself uh, messages of safety. It's like, okay, don't have to like it. It's here. This is what it feels like, but I know I'm safe. It's okay to be with this sensation. And that can
Right.
take some of the power away from it. And it also
Right. So
involves, yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
So, oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I get
Hmm.
excited when you talk that way
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, because it's really in that case, it's like sitting, putting yourself in the position of someone who's having a painful experience instead of
Hmm.
I am in pain. It's more like I'm someone who's experiencing pain, and where
Right.
I'm in a bigger seat. It's like my whole world isn't this painfulness, but that's
Hmm.
happening, and I want to acknowledge it. So it's
Yeah.
just by doing that, you make yourself bigger than that experience.
Yeah. And that's an important distinction, too, which you just mentioned. So it's not my my sore back. I'm experiencing pain, this sensation in my back. It's not my fibromyalgia. It's
Hmm.
Well, I would actually discourage somebody from even using fibromyalgia if that's what they've been told, because
Using that
fibromyalgia
word, you
is,
mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's fibromyalgia honestly tends to be it's a diagnosis of exclusion we know you're in a lot of pain. We can't figure out what's wrong with you. So it must be
So, so
fibromyalgia. And it's real, honest to goodness pain that,
yeah,
that people are experiencing. But
right.
having that name attached to it, having a diagnosis from a medical professional of that, and being told that there's no cure for it, that's a recipe for amplification
Well,
of
when
the
you say
pain
that,
and
I just
over
feel this.
identification.
Yeah, I feel the spell of it in a way. It's almost like,
Mm-hmm.
and to the people out there who are listening, who are going through these struggles, these like years of trying to figure this out, hurting, what would you say? Like, how can they begin to explore the kinds of things that you're talking about?
Yeah. First of all, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that people who have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia or anything like this, or just, sciatica, whatever it might be, migraines. I want to be clear that their pain is real. They're not making it up.
Exactly.
The struggle that they're going through is 100% real. Um, And I think that the thing for them to do is to, of course, always first make sure that you can rule out any kind of structural damage, disease, those sorts of things with a medical professional. So make sure
Hmm.
that you are indeed in the clear for those things, and then see if you can open up to the idea of these symptoms being due to emotions, to stress, and your brain's way of telling you that your internal world may need a little tidying up.
Let's say that you don't know, you're open to the idea, but you don't necessarily want to buy it all up front. So how is it worth like pursuing a practice to see if it helps? Like beginning to do some kind of work with this app, or calling you and beginning to go through some practices just to see it, does that actually make a difference? And then kind of like you were saying, it was an incremental process for you as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are a lot of stories out there, a lot of different stories about the healing path, the recovery path from mind body syndrome. And some people have been, it's a minority of people, but some people have been known to read a book. There was a doctor who worked at NYU's Rusk Center for Rehabilitation, Dr. John Sarno. He passed away in 2017, I think, but he was one of the pioneers in this field of mind body medicine and treatment. And he wrote a few books. One of the most famous is called Healing Back Pain. And there are stories that people have read the book, understood, maybe gotten the relief that this isn't due to something that is really life threatening, and
Mm.
we're able to move on with their lives.
Hmm.
That's not typical, but it has happened, right? You kind of get into the mindset that, oh, I really am okay. And then there are, then sometimes it can take a little longer to buy into the premise, and I don't mean intellectually buy into it. You
Yes,
can, yeah,
exactly.
but to really embody that premise that this is generated by the mind and by emotions, and particularly
And
fear.
that's not going to happen until I think you have an experience of getting better. I
Right,
say it's not
right.
going to happen. I say something. I mean, for me, it's like the way I take things on is by trying them out. And does this work? Well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do I know why it works? No, but I know that it works, and so I'm going to get more involved. And that's how I got involved in the whole stuff that I
Right.
do. It's such a powerful experience of direct benefit of somatic work. Um,
Mm-hmm. So really, that's the first step, is just kind of being a little more educated. And in my coaching program, that's where we start, is
mhm.
in that educational phase of here's an alternative possibility for you for why all of this is happening, and here's what supports that possibility, right? The science and the research behind it. And there is a growing body of research that supports that this is This is a real thing. This isn't smoke and mirrors. This isn't, snake oil, anything like that. Um, and from that point, it really depends on the individual. Once they cross that hurdle, then there can be many different approaches to it. There's a lot of writing and journaling that can be involved. That can be really
Hmm.
helpful. The actual practices of mindfulness and meditation and somatic tracking. Um, Getting back gradually
Hmm.
into life's activities, right? Using your body a little more at a pace that's right for you. Because I typically take a dual track approach to working with people, because there's whatever initially brought the pain on to begin with, right? Or the symptoms. Um, which might be, have to do with life circumstances. It could have been, stressful time at home. It could
Sure.
could could be a divorce. It could be, could even be good things, right? That the birth of a child or buying a house,
Right.
as
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. A big
as
part of it
was in
is
my
just like
case.
learning to understand like what's your state of your normal background noise in the nervous system. And you see,
Yes,
so
yes.
many
Mm-hmm.
times when I work with clients and even in myself, I'll just start to tune in to like what is the state of my nervous system, and I find, oh my gosh, it's really kind of on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, yeah.
you get so used to that as just the normal state of things that it just because
Mm-hmm.
the way the brain works, it just pushes that into the background and goes, oh, nothing special here. This is normal. But the truth
Right,
of it is,
right.
our nervous systems, it's not normal. We just live in a hyperactive world. And organically, that has an impact. And I think these are some of the impacts that we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So that's the one track, right? Is taking a look at what may have been going on in your life when these symptoms occurred. What's at the root of what's happening, and then there's also the other part is dealing with that pain fear cycle that I discussed,
Hmm.
because there's the pain, and then there's the fear of the pain that amplifies the pain, and that's another thing that's happening concurrently. You may acknowledge, okay, yeah, I was going through all this stress and I was grieving or whatever it might be, but I know that, but why can I still not get out of this
So, what would you say
cycle?
to people as a good like takeaway, real time, implementable intervention for when you notice that's going on? What do you tell people to do like right then?
When they
Oh,
notice that maybe the pain is flaring up, or they're
yeah, the
starting
pain is
to.
flaring up and the fear is coming, and it's like, what would you
Mhm.
tell someone to do? Like, oh my God, it's the pain. It's like, not again. How am I going to deal? Like all of that. What would you
Yeah,
advise
yeah.
someone?
The
You know?
catastrophizing. Well, one of the things you can do is redirect your thoughts to something else. Engage in something that is. I mean, you don't want to ignore what's going on with you, but if you've accepted that this is that this is really what's happening to you, that you're not broken or anything like that. One thing that can be helpful is reminding yourself of that, right? It's like, okay, the pain is here. Maybe you can jump into a little bit of somatic tracking if the pain
Hmm.
isn't too severe. Um, you can also, affirmations can sometimes be
Hmm.
helpful. Just self talk and reminders to yourself that, yeah, this is okay. This is really hard right now.
This is hard. Yeah.
Self compassion practices
Mhm.
can be helpful too. Um, like Kristen Neff has a great 5 minute self compassion practice where you just acknowledge what's going on. You acknowledge that it's hard. You're not alone in suffering, even though your own type of suffering may be unique to you, but you're not alone in
Mhm.
this world. And just give yourself some words of kindness. And that can help take it down enough for a person to be able to move on with their day.
Right. And the important point there is to like interrupt that cycle, so that it
Yes.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
keep, so that you don't just keep repeating the loop, because otherwise, you're lost.
Right. When you keep repeating the loop, we talked about neuroplasticity a
Mm-hmm.
little earlier on, right? The more you repeat the loop, the stronger those neuronal connections become. So what we want to do is take advantage of the brain's neuroplasticity to gradually rewire it
Mm-hmm.
to a different way of thinking, a different default system.
So
And
if
it
people,
takes practice. So I don't want to, I don't want people to think that, yeah, all I got to do is do a little self-compassion and I'm good to go. But it's reps, right? Small
right.
doses administered frequently are what the brain responds to and what this condition responds to.
Well, it's so great that you're doing this work, and I'm just really happy that you're engaged in helping people who are suffering in this way, and that you found a way to, you know, bring yourself into, a more whole place as well. So it's a really beautiful story, and the work that you're doing is amazing. So how can people find you, Rob?
People, the easiest way to find me is at my website, and I guess you'll put
I
the link
will.
in the
I
show
will.
notes. But it is roblieblein.com.
The link will be in the show notes, and you can
Yes,
also look him up, his profile on mindfulcoachassociation.com. You can just search
yeah,
the word Rob, and you'll come up with
mm-hmm.
his profile. And
Yeah, and my through my website, it's really easy to schedule a free consultation with me. I have uh, an, a freebie that I can offer people
nice.
on explaining a little more about neuroplastic pain or mind body pain. If people want to take a little deeper dive into that, and I would love to have a chat with anybody who thinks that they might benefit from what I have to offer. And if you can't benefit from what I have to offer, I will definitely let you know. Right? I just want to help people. So
Yeah. Well, that's yes, big yes to that. We want to help people. And that's, in fact, what I love about the Mindful Coach Association is it's like a collection of really great coaches like yourself and people who are inspired by the calling to be helpful to other people who are suffering and who need work and need help. And Lord knows there's a lot of that going around these days. So thank
mm-hmm.
you, Rob, for being here. It's been great talking to you. Um, what if you were to leave our listeners with a wish or a thought? What might that be?
Well, I think the thought might be that chronic pain is one of the biggest reasons for disability in the world
Mm,
globally, and it's a blind spot in the current medical community and the state that they're in. So don't give up hope. If nobody's been able to tell you what's going on, or if you're uncertain or unclear on what you've been told, by all means, seek
mm,
out a different way of looking at what's going on with you. Because if I got better, I'm sure a lot of other people can get better, and we just need people to know a little more about this as a possibility for them, rather than having them kind of hide in their own suffering and miss out on so much of what they want to be participating in with their lives.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you. And that's a wrap for this edition of the Mindful Coach podcast. And we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brent.
The Mindful Coach podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.